The homeowners association tried to steal my farm. They forgot one crucial detail: I control their water. When I discovered that the association had secretly sold 1,700 acres of my family's land, I knew I had to fight back. But instead of rushing straight to court, I decided to remind them of something they had overlooked: the water supply was under my control. The association made its first move on a perfect morning for planting. The sky was clear, and a gentle breeze swept across the fields. I was already on the tractor before sunrise, just as my grandfather had taught me, when my phone started vibrating non-stop. When I checked the messages, I nearly choked on my sandwich. 10 missed calls from neighbors, 3 voicemails from my cousin, and an email from the association with a violation notice. I opened the email. They claimed the noise from my tractor violated the community's right to peace and quiet, and that the smell from my chicken coops was affecting property values. They gave me 48 hours to shut down all farming operations, or they would start fining me $200 a day. I burst out laughing. They had no authority over my land. The next day, however, the association's president showed up in person. I heard a car door slam and saw a woman in a spotless white suit crossing my front yard, folder in hand, accompanied by 2 board members. "Miss Walker," she said, "I'm Deborah Williams, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Association. We need to talk about your violations." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. Your association has no jurisdiction over my property." Deborah smiled, though her eyes remained cold. "Actually, according to the county zoning board, your agricultural exemption expired last year. That means your land is now subject to our regulations." That caught me off guard. My taxes hadn't changed, and my family had been farming that land for over 100 years. No association could suddenly decide it was in charge. "Times change, Miss Walker," she replied coolly, handing me a cease and desist order before walking away. Something didn't add up. I called my cousin Tom, who lived in the community and served on the city council. "They've been planning this for months," he warned me. "Deborah has been meeting secretly with developers and has even altered meeting minutes after they were approved." That same night, I checked the county records and discovered the lie. My agricultural exemption was still valid for another 5 years. Deborah had falsified the information. I ignored the association's letters for a week, until they started reporting me daily for noise complaints. "Look, Mick," Sheriff Davis, an old school friend, told me, "I know this is ridiculous, but they're filing complaints non-stop. They even want to declare your farm a public nuisance." I asked him what was really going on. He hesitated before answering. "I shouldn't tell you this, but the association is pushing a massive real estate development, and your land is part of the plan." It didn't take long to confirm it. I spotted several men in suits walking through my fields, taking photos and measurements. I jumped into my truck and drove straight toward them. "Can I help you?" "You're on private property," I shouted. A tall man turned around. "I'm James Miller from Best Development Corporation. We're conducting planning surveys." "Planning for what?" "This is my farm," I said. Miller looked confused. "According to our documents, we purchased 1,700 acres from the Oak Ridge Estates Association 3 weeks ago. Construction begins next month." My heart nearly stopped. I had never sold my land. He showed me official documents, county-stamped maps, and a signature identical to mine, but forged. I rushed home and checked the deeds locked in my safe. Everything looked right, but I immediately called the county registrar. "There's a transfer on record from 6 weeks ago," the clerk told me. "According to our files, 1,700 acres were transferred to the Oak Ridge Community Trust. You now retain only 300 acres. When I reviewed the documents, my worst fear was confirmed. My signature had been forged. I looked up and saw her, Deborah, sitting in her luxury SUV, parked at the edge of my property. When she noticed me staring, she smiled and waved. I had less than a month before the bulldozers arrived. That's when I remembered something crucial. Who controlled the water? In 1943, my grandfather signed an agreement with the county to build a reservoir on our land. In exchange, our family was granted full control over water distribution. Not a single drop could be diverted without our authorization. That detail had been ignored by the association and the developers when they forged my signature and seized my land. I tried to fight through legal channels. I presented evidence and reported the fraud, but my lawyer was blunt. The process could take years. Even with proof, I was up against billion-dollar corporations and corrupt politicians. The legal battle was lost, but they still didn't understand one thing: without water, their project would never exist. In the end, everything got trapped in bureaucracy. Before I could stop it, the developers had already begun preparing the land for construction. I had no choice. I lost my farm. The machines arrived, tore down the barns, ripped out the fences, and leveled the fields my family had cultivated for generations. The place where I grew up, where I learned to drive a tractor alongside my grandfather, was transformed into a massive construction site filled with cranes and cement trucks. I watched it all without intervening. I didn't protest. I didn't try to stop the bulldozers. I didn't give speeches against the greed of speculators. I simply waited. And I waited for years. The project moved forward relentlessly. The land that once fed the entire region became one of the largest real estate developments in the state. Luxury condominiums, shopping centers, office buildings, and private parks. They wanted to turn my family's former farm into an urban paradise, a symbol of modernity and prosperity. Investors poured in millions, politicians appeared on television talking about a city within a city, and the real estate market was booming. Construction companies competed to build skyscrapers and exclusive homes for future buyers. And I kept waiting. Every building that rose, every paved street, every artificial park they inaugurated strengthened my plan. The developers, politicians, and investors were convinced they had defeated me. They believed they had pushed me out, that they had built over my history. But there was one thing no one noticed. They had built everything dependent on my water. Thousands of homes, luxury condos, shopping centers, restaurants, and private clubs relied on the reservoir built on what was once my farm. And that reservoir was still mine. The agreement my grandfather signed was never revoked. When they stole my land, they only took the soil, not the water rights. Not a single construction company took the time to check that small detail. Pre-sales began. Buyers were excited. Real estate agents showcased impressive models and promised a modern, perfect, and sustainable city. Television ads claimed the place would become the new epicenter of innovation and development, an ideal environment to raise families with a high quality of life. That's when I executed my plan. The city was nearly finished, but the sales had not yet been finalized. No one had moved in. No investor had recovered their money. They were about to sign multi-million-dollar contracts without realizing they were standing on a ticking time bomb. One night, with everything ready for the grand opening, I sent my official notice. The next morning, the headlines said it all. Mega project in crisis. Water supply at risk. New urban development depends on a private water source. Investors on edge. Project could become a ghost city. Chaos erupted. Phones rang non-stop in construction offices. Lawyers frantically reviewed contracts. Executives broke into a sweat as thousands of buyers canceled their reservations. Just as I expected, they called me in for a meeting. This time, Deborah wasn't alone. Everyone was there: construction company owners, lawyers, investors, even the mayor. They looked at me as if I were the villain of the story. One man adjusted his tie and spoke with a tense voice. "We can resolve this amicably. How much money do you want to release the water supply?" I crossed my arms. "I don't want money." The relief some of them tried to show vanished instantly. "Then what do you want?" another asked. I smiled slowly, letting them sink deeper into their panic before answering. "I want everything back." Deborah, sitting in a corner, snapped. "This is ridiculous. You're lying. The government can't allow a single person to sabotage a project of this magnitude." I tilted my head calmly. Try it. But remember, you have beautiful buildings, luxury condos, parks, and shopping centers, without a single drop of water. Several businessmen exchanged terrified looks. A lawyer tried to negotiate, but Deborah angrily interrupted him. I let out a low laugh. You have 48 hours to void the sale of my land and legally return it to my name. After that, I'll speak to the press and my lawyers. The meeting ended without an agreement, but I already knew I had won. In the following days, the media exposed the scandal. Investors began pulling out. Construction companies fell into crisis. Lawyers searched for a way out, but none existed without accepting my terms. All that was left was to wait a little longer. And just as I knew they would, they called me back. I sat at the head of the table, watching the tense faces of executives, lawyers, and investors. They were desperate. Some drummed their fingers. Others checked their phones, hoping for a miracle. But they all knew the truth. There was no solution without me. After a long silence, one of them finally spoke. What is your demand to release the water supply? I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. I want everything back. My farm. My land. Every inch you stole from me. I want it all returned to my name. The reactions were immediate. Murmurs, whispers, and incredulous stares spread across the room. Then Deborah, who had remained silent until that moment, exploded. That's impossible. You lost that land legally. It was bought and sold in accordance with the law. You'll never get it back. I crossed my arms and stared straight into her eyes. Legally? Do you really want to use that word? I asked calmly. Because as far as I remember, my signature was forged. Silence fell again, this time heavy and suffocating. No one dared contradict me. Before anyone could react, my lawyer, a gray-haired man with a cold stare, cleared his throat and leaned toward me. Mike, I need to speak with you privately. I raised an eyebrow, annoyed by the interruption, but nodded and followed him to a corner of the room. As soon as the door closed, he looked at me with absolute seriousness. You're about to make a mistake. If you insist on getting that land back, you could lose everything. Anger hit me instantly. What are you talking about? You know that land is mine. We have proof. He sighed, crossing his arms. Yes, we do. But that doesn't guarantee you'll win. These companies have the best lawyers in the country, political connections, and unlimited resources. They can drag this case out for decades. Even proving the forgery, getting the land back would be an endless process. I clenched my fists. I had waited years for this moment. I wasn't about to let it slip away. So what do you suggest? I asked sharply. He studied me in silence for a few seconds, then smiled knowingly. Make them pay to stay. I frowned. What are you talking about? Right now, Mike, you have something you've never had before. Power. Everyone is watching this case. Investors are nervous. Politicians are panicking. Use it. I still didn't fully understand. He took a deep breath and continued. Officially prove that your signature was forged. Make it indisputable. Legally, that land will still be yours. But instead of trying to reclaim it, turn it into your investment. They've spent billions here, they can't walk away. Charge them lifetime rent to use what belongs to you, and you'll become a multimillionaire. You don't need the land. You just need them to pay you forever. I looked at him with a mix of anger and disbelief. You want me to lease my own land to the people who stole it from me? He smiled. I want you to make more money than you ever imagined, and make sure no one can ever take anything from you again. The idea unsettled me. Part of me wanted revenge. I wanted to see the project collapse, to watch Deborah and the speculators lose everything. But another part of me knew he was right. If I demanded the land back, they would fight to the end. If I forced them to pay to stay, there was no escape. I returned to the conference room. Everyone was watching me, waiting for my decision. I took a deep breath and spoke firmly. First of all, you should know that I have already proven my signature was forged. If I take this to court, the case will drag on for years and your project will be frozen. I saw their expressions tighten. But I'm not an unreasonable man. I know there are billions invested here and many families involved. That's why I have a proposal. I interlaced my fingers and smiled. I don't want your companies or your buildings. I want my name on the deed to this land and a lifetime lease agreement. Every square meter will officially belong to me, and you will pay, month after month forever, to keep using what you stole from me. The impact was immediate. One investor slammed his fist on the table. This is outright extortion. I tilted my head. Oh, now you're worried about theft? How ironic. A lawyer tried to intervene. We can offer a one-time settlement and close this case. I slowly shook my head. I'm not asking. I'm informing you. If you reject this, the case goes to court tomorrow and the entire project will be declared illegal. All of you will lose. Absolute silence. Deborah was pale. She knew she had lost. Lawyers whispered among themselves. Investors frantically checked their phones. I simply waited. I knew they were cornered. Finally, one of the directors spoke. We need time to discuss this internally. I shrugged. You have 24 hours. I stood up and walked out of the room with the weight of victory on my shoulders. The game wasn't over yet, but I already had them against the wall. They could try to buy time, look for loopholes, but deep down, they knew there was no way out. Still, something unsettled me. Deborah had been far too quiet, and I knew someone like her never surrendered easily. The following days were a test of patience. As I waited for their response, the media continued exposing the scandal. Newspapers, television, and investigative blogs dissected every detail. The forged signature, the corrupt maneuvers, and how my land had been stolen from me. Time was on my side. Experts debated in the media whether the project could survive such a disaster, while economists warned that a financial collapse was imminent if an immediate solution was not found. Finally, after 24 hours of closed-door meetings, I received the call I had been waiting for. We accept the terms, said one of the lawyers representing the investor group. His voice sounded strained, as if every word cost him a piece of his pride. Good, I replied calmly. We'll sign tomorrow. The next day, I walked into the conference room of one of the most luxurious offices in the city. Everyone was there, executives from major corporations, high-profile lawyers, investors with furrowed brows, and of course, Deborah. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with hatred. She knew she had lost, even if she still refused to accept it. The documents were already prepared. I reviewed them with my lawyer, and everything was in order. The lifetime lease agreement, the official recognition that the land belonged to me, and the conditions for the water supply. There's one detail missing, I said as I reached the final clauses. You'll also pay for the water you use. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. One of the lawyers frowned. We're already paying rent for the land. That's not enough, I replied, closing the folder. You know perfectly well that this entire place depends on the reservoir. My grandfather signed an agreement granting my family full control over the water supply. If you want to stay, you'll pay for the water as well. No one could object. They had no alternative. Deborah clenched her teeth, her fists tight against the table. This is extortion, she spat. I tilted my head with a calm smile. No. It's charging what belongs to me. Unlike you, I don't need to forge documents to do it. The agreement was signed on the spot. Before leaving, I shook hands with a few investors who, though clearly upset, tried to maintain their composure. Deborah couldn't even look me in the eye. The next day, I restored the water supply, this time under contract. Every drop flowing through those pipes began generating enormous income for me. The project was saved, buyers returned, and money started flowing again. That was only the beginning. My name appeared on every contract. Every transaction passed through me. No company could operate there without paying rent and water fees. It was a perpetual toll, a monthly tribute that ensured millions flowed into my bank account without me lifting a single finger. Soon after, the time came to officially prove the forgery of my signature. With the scandal still fresh, taking the case to court was easy. We had overwhelming evidence, forensic analyses, comparative documents, and testimony from notary office employees confirming I had never signed those papers. The judge didn't hesitate to issue a ruling. The signature was fake, and the land transfer was illegal. That would have meant I could reclaim the property and expel everyone, but by then, it made no sense. I was already earning more money than anyone in that room could have imagined. If I took the land back, I would have had to manage everything, rebuild infrastructure, and face new lawsuits. Instead, as the owner of both the land and the water, they had no choice but to keep paying me. So instead of kicking them out, I raised the rent. The court ruling gave me even more power. Now I could renegotiate contracts in my favor. Some companies protested, calling the new terms abusive. My lawyer simply smiled and replied, "If you don't want to pay, you're free to demolish everything and leave." No one left. I became a multi-millionaire with little effort, but I didn't stop there. With the absurd profits I was generating, I diversified my investments, bought land in other regions, entered the real estate market, and financed modern agricultural projects. I went from being a farmer who had everything taken from him to becoming a magnate of land and infrastructure. The irony was delicious. The same investors who once mocked me were now looking to partner with me. And Deborah? Her career was destroyed. Once the forgery was proven, her name was permanently stained. It was revealed that she had not only forged my signature but also altered records to approve projects without public consultation. She was sued, lost all influence, and was discarded by investors without hesitation. Still, she didn't give up. Even after losing everything, she tried to get back into the game. I learned she was gathering new investors to try to invalidate my contracts. I knew she would look for a dirty move, perhaps another legal trap to escape the lifetime payments. But this time, I was ready. It was years of battle. The day I signed that lifetime lease marked the beginning of my empire, even though the war was far from over. What followed was a long game of patience, a silent struggle in which, for the first time, I was in control. 4 years, the former homeowners association, the investors, and the politicians who tried to crush me had to accept reality. I was the owner of that land, and there was nothing they could do to change it. The first few years were the most turbulent. Even though they had accepted the terms, they tried every possible way to find legal loopholes, renegotiate conditions, or even intimidate me. They sued me again and again, but every case collapsed as soon as judges reviewed the documents. The law was on my side. And this time, so was power. The contracts were unbreakable. Every building in that massive development owed me money every single month, without exception. It didn't matter if the economy fell into crisis, if the real estate market collapsed, or if investors fled. For them to keep operating, they had to pay me. That's how I built my family's fortune. Over time, that income stopped being just a steady cash flow and turned into a true financial empire. I diversified my investments, bought more land, acquired companies, and launched my own real estate developments. I expanded into technology, modern agriculture, and even urban infrastructure. Soon, we became an economic force impossible to ignore. The irony was obvious. The same investors who once tried to crush me now came to me, asking for financing for their projects. And what happened to those who tried to rob me? The former homeowners association disappeared completely. The forgery scandal destroyed its reputation, and over time, the residents themselves turned against it. They discovered that the money from fees and land sales never benefited them. It ended up in the hands of speculators and corrupt figures pulling the strings from the shadows. The association's name became synonymous with failure and corruption. As for the investors, some accepted defeat and continued paying the rent religiously. Others tried to escape the business by selling their properties, but no one wanted to buy land bound by an eternal lease. Some declared bankruptcy, Others simply resigned themselves to the fact that no matter what they did, I would always make money because of them. Deborah was, without a doubt, the one who fought hardest to stay afloat. Despite being exposed as the mastermind behind the fraud, she refused to disappear. She tried entering other businesses, sought funding, and even attempted to start her own real estate consulting firm, but no one trusted her. No serious investor wanted their name associated with her. The blow she tried to deal me ended up condemning her forever. At first, she pretended she still had influence, attending industry events and meetings, but over the years fewer and fewer people wanted anything to do with her. Her name became synonymous with scams and financial disaster. Eventually, she vanished from the scene. I know her life today is very different from what she once imagined. She didn't fall into absolute ruin, but she never regained power, respect, or relevance. The last I heard, she moved to a small town, trying to rebuild her life far from scandal. Wherever she is, she knows she lost. My life, on the other hand, changed forever. I went from being a farmer on the brink of losing everything to becoming one of the most important investors in the region. My family now has a legacy no one can erase. Everything we built was born from what they tried to steal from me, and in the end, we were the ones who emerged victorious. Today, my family owns an empire. My children and grandchildren will never have to fight the way I did, but they will always know where it all came from. They grew up understanding that what we have didn't come from luck or an easy inheritance. It came because I spent years defending what was rightfully ours. And best of all, I didn't have to destroy anyone. They destroyed themselves. Those who tried to crush me now have nothing, while I keep everything that was mine by right, and much more. This was my revenge, and I enjoy it every single day. If this story made you think, give it a like, subscribe, and comment what you would have done. Don't forget to share it with someone who believes in justice and perseverance.